All right. Well, Alexa, it's so good to see you on the screen and
Yeah.
to have a conversation. I see you got some nice warm drink.
Yes, I'm having green tea.
Mm, okay. I gave up caffeine last year.
Oh, good for you.
It was a challenge, but I sometimes I have chocolate, which I guess is technically caffeine, but um, it was hard. It was hard. I was just watching one of your talks. I didn't know you had so many talks online, and I was checking out your page and was watching your talk that you gave for the Flint Hills Ranching Heritage
Oh,
group,
yeah.
and it was wow, that was a really cool talk. I think you covered so much stuff, and I would love to get into a lot of those things. Maybe not quite in as much depth as you took it there, because I would love to just tell people to check out your talk because it's got so much going on. I think that's relevant. But I wrote some questions and I mean kind of topics to cover, but I also like to I'd keep it pretty fluid. I know you had an introduction in your talk that you gave, and I thought that might be nice for the podcast as well.
Sure. Yeah. Still kind of waking up. So let me clear my throat here.
Yeah, me
um,
too.
so, Anin is a way that we say hello, and Amon Dejnakas, Bodewatami Anishinaabe Kwendao, Shishibeni and Debendagwas, Oklahoma and Dochbia, Mina, Kansas, Osage, Mina, Kanza, Akik, and Data, Jigwe, Mina, Mashike, and Dodemic. So those are that's a traditional protocol introduction as we might offer in our meetings or lodges, and I like to say that it reminds me first of all who I am and where I came from, and that's quite literally like Donjiba or Dochbia means my bones are from Oklahoma. So like as a physical being, that's where I come from.
Mm,
Um, and then also who my clan responsibilities with the clans that I've identified with and been adopted to. So yeah, it's a good thing, I think, to have a set of I I learned somewhere that we only know who we are because of who we're not, or we only know who we are in relation to everything around us.
mm,
And so I think that that's like an inherent technology in the indigenous language and languages, and also in that traditional protocol greeting is like an explanation of all of our relationships, and where we came from, who our families are, and things like that. Um, that starts us off in a good way, to
mm,
to discuss who we what we have to say, because it contextualizes who I am and what I'm gonna say.
mm. Yeah, I like how you refer to it as a technology, and thinking of language and these tools for conversation are a form of technology because we've invented them, we've developed them. It's a kind of software, maybe even like for our brains and for our groups, for how we organize. And I mean that's a nice way to look at it.
Yeah.
In your first line of your bio, it calls you say a practitioner of the soul, and I really like that. I think that's a nice holistic way of describing a person. Could you go more into that concept?
Well, I don't know about you, but I've been in like 1,000 bio writing workshops, and just like going over and over writing your bio. And I'm a chronic bio changer. I love to change my bio. So I have settled on this one for maybe longer than I don't know. It's still pretty new, actually, now that I think about it. But I've gone through, when I started off a solo career, I started talking about how music is medicine, and that's what I wanted to be sort of like my my guiding star, that was like my southern star, like what I'm always going to be looking at when I produce music. Um and so like I've never written a song called Music is Medicine, but I have an album called Music is Medicine. And then moving away from that album and doing like Wanderlust, there's still a lot of that was a collaboration, but with people who believe, music is medicine as well. And so we were working, I think, on that. And so it's the practitioner of the soul kind of came from thinking about how to talk about medicine and especially in a live performance, how to talk about what's going to happen because like um, entertainment is really subjective. Like there's just so many different ways to entertain, and so I think in an artist bio you try to give a preview, of what you're trying to encapsulate in a sentence or two, like what the audience is going to be able to anticipate seeing. And so many times I've had people tell me, oh, you really made me tear up, or you really got me with that song, or I felt really emotional. Basically, they're saying you made me cry. And I used to say things like, Alexa Dawson writes songs that help people cry, or, things like that, which was a little bit more of a blatant way to say it. But I think Practitioner of the Soul kind of sounded a little bit more poetic, and it works in the practitioner part is sort of that the medical vision of like this is not bubblegum pop. We're actually going to be doing some like surgery, we're going to be doing some emotional work in this session. And that's just who I am as a songwriter and who I am as a deliverer of that message in the live setting. So I try to just be me and talk about that as well as I can.
Yeah, music as a form of healing is a really powerful concept, especially when we got this pop world where it's kind of everyone's singing about bad relationships and encouraging all of these behaviors. And I mean, I love a good murder ballad. I do think a good murder ballad though shows why it's a bad idea,
right?
If we show these behaviors that are harmful, it's nice that there's a consequence in the song, hopefully. I like the concept of music as medicine a lot because I felt it in many times, just either hearing music in the right moment or playing music for people or singing together. There's a lot of healing going on, that connection with others, and you can release oxytocin. I was talking to someone from Finland one time, and I was like, how do you get through the winters? And they are like, well, we have choir and we have sauna. So they do the sauna and they have a choir and they sing. And that's how they get through the winter. Mm-hmm. It creates like some feeling of belonging. I really like how when you perform, you do these song circle type songs where everyone's invited to get into it immediately. Like, hey, let's start this off. I want to bring us all together. And I guess that's a similar technology to the introduction that you gave. In a way, it's like a musical version of that.
Yeah, I think it's good to invite people to actually participate. I think that music is not a spectator sport is another little joke phrase that I've used in live settings. Just because I can't help but affect you. Like if I'm singing for you, if I'm playing music for you, I can't, what's going to happen is like I'm going to be changing things inside of your body. And so like I feel like inviting people to participate in that in a willing way and getting kind of their buy-in first is in some ways like a way of respecting like their decision to be there, and we're always anytime I'm saying we, I'm also talking about when I perform with the skirts, with Weta skirts. We had a show last night, and so I'm sort of like fresh off of that too.
Yeah,
but we had a really great little short set at a big showcase for a women in music festival. And anyway, when we perform, there's a lot of energy. It's a very different show, than when it's just me by myself. But even then, like we're inviting the audience to we're realizing, recognizing, and naming that like they're a part of this, and the show would not be the same if you weren't here. Specifically each and every one of you. Like everybody who is in this room is bringing their own energetic offering, into the space, and that's affecting us. It's affecting how we play. It's affecting how we sing and how we're able to deliver our message. So yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So you mentioned We Just Skirts, and I know you've been with them for a while, and I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit of your background to your musical history.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and tell the joke. When I was born to very young parents, both my grandmothers were in the waiting room at the hospital, and they heard me cry, and my granny said, "That sounds like a boy." And my Nana said, "No, that's an alto." And my Nana was a singer, and she taught me to sing. She had me singing all the time. She was singing all the time. She would sing walking around the house. She would sing in the car. She would always be singing. And so she also and my granny both like had us in dance classes and even like children's theater classes and things like that. And so I've always been kind of on the stage. I feel like I was born on the stage, and I feel very comfortable and feel like very fulfilled and like I'm doing a good job when I'm on stage and performing. So that's part of the drive. That's part of the purpose. But also we came up in the tradition of like the front porch picking, the jam sessions, kind of that, singing all the old standards. But then also my uncle Tom, who's passed on, he played a lot of, kind of more contemporary folk stuff for us. And so we had that tradition of just singing all the time. And after attending my first Walnut Valley Festival in 1999, I had a 2-month-old baby girl, and I was just a baby myself, and my grandparents had been going there for a while. And I always just kind of pictured like just like a bunch of old ladies and old men playing mountain dulcimers and auto harps, because that's like what my parents or my grandparents were. And so I had this baby and like nothing much to do, and my aunt was driving to WINFIELD, and she said, "Do you want to go?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's go." So we threw the car seat in the car, just not knowing what to expect, and we showed up and finally found my grandparents' campsite. It was such a bigger deal than we like anticipated, and my Nana took my baby and said, "Now go that way to the pecan grove." She pointed, and I'm like, "Okay." So I get over there, and what's really funny to me is like I walk up on stage 5, that was like the first thing that I see. And Jason Boland and the Stragglers, do you know who that is?
Mm-mm.
They're a red dirt country band that has played for obviously like 20, 30 years. They were on stage and they were playing like the hit, like Cheap Bourbon Whiskey and Pearl Snap Shirts was like their big hit at that time. And the guy grew up like 30 minutes north of me in Chandler, and I just never like had been exposed to that side of the music scene in and around Stillwater. And there's a lot of really great culture down there that I just hadn't been exposed to. And so anyway, kind of rambling, but WINFIELD was a big change, like a big shift toward getting me back to playing guitar. Like I had my grandma had taken me to guitar lessons when I was like 15, 16 years old, but I went to prom and had like fake nails put on, so I couldn't play guitar anymore. and then I go to WINFIELD and I'm like, oh wait, I remember learning how to play guitar. You know, my papa had taught me how to play. And so I picked up a guitar and started playing. And my grandparents were very supportive of that and made sure I had a guitar to play. And then I started writing music. And yeah, that's kind of the origin story, I guess.
Nice. I didn't realize you were going to Winfield for so long.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. Every year.
Wow.
Since 1999. Yeah.
Yeah, I discovered it, I think, around 2006 or 7. I think I went for the first time. I'd heard about it, that it was amazing. And I went with my girlfriend at the time, and we just kind of went for one day on a Saturday and just went to the main stage and the maybe stage, saw the craft fair. And then I think we walked through the pecan grove just briefly before we left.
Mm-hmm.
And saw like, oh, what's this part of the festival? And then we, that was it. And it was kind of lackluster, I guess, just the main stages. And then I went back 2 years ago, and I barely went to the main stages. I mean, it was a way different experience when you're in the pecan grove and all the little side pop-up stages. And there's so much music that's there that is, there's some great music on the main stages. Like I got to see you guys play, and Sally and the Hertz and some other cool artists, Old Sound. But the real jam is the off main.
Yeah.
The side stages are so cool.
For years, I think I'll just say it this way, that the new leadership there at the Walnut Valley Festival, Bart has, taken over, and he's done a lot to make sure that the essence of what goes on in the campground and like the people that have really come up. I mean, the Skirts were born at Winfield, and so many bands were born there, and so I think it's really cool that they're I would say bridging the divide, that used to really exist between like the campground scene and the grandstand scene. So I think it's cool.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
That's happening. Let's see. So we got that. Okay. You're a citizen of the Potawatomi Nation. And how has that journey been to be a citizen of a sovereign nation such as Potawatomi in the United States? And do you have some observations from that perspective that you could share?
Yeah. That's a lot. No, I have to kind of narrow it down. So the Citizen Potawatomi Nation used to be the Citizen Band of Potawatomi. We're called so because the Potawatomi were originally from the Great Lakes region. My ancestors were there at the founding of Chicago, ran taverns and ferries and things like that before the city was actually formed. And prior to that, migrated from a little further north, but the Citizen Band came from Kansas, and after the Trail of Death that brought people from Indiana to Kansas, many of our relatives, not specifically my OG ancestors or Bobian ancestors, because they kind of came by a different way. I guess my journey through learning about like all of these things is that as much as we want to say that racism doesn't exist or doesn't matter, like it completely built this country, even as colonized and as assimilated as some of my ancestors were, like Charles Bobian, who, founded the city of Chicago. He was there. He was a businessman. He was a capitalist, and that did not save him from losing his land, the land that Fort Dearborn was built on, in a Supreme Court case because it was Indian land, and so they felt that they could take it. the same with my family that was in, after coming to Kansas, they settled and built places like Silver Lake, Wamego, there's like this corridor of Potawatomi towns that's up there by Rossville. So there were all these, Potawatomi folks that had been removed already. And then, like, conveniently, the railroad just needed to go right through their property, right? And so the choice was, and I don't know how far you got. I get really into this on the talk that I did at Pioneer Bluffs, but the choice was like, take United States citizenship, which they still didn't have after all of this time of being. These were not people who were dressed in loincloths, right? Like, these were people who were working jobs, who had industries, and they still were, not worthy of citizenship. And citizenship was sort of this like carrot on a stick to take private property over common property, because common property was a lot harder to break up. So the move to Oklahoma gained them United States citizenship and gave them private property. So the Citizen Potawatomi Nation is very different. The Citizen Band Potawatomi is different than a lot of other sovereign nations in that we don't have what you would call a reservation. We call it the res, but it's not technically legally a reservation. It's more of a jurisdiction. And so because of that acceptance of the private property. So I think that sometimes folks assume like that Native people, I'll say it this way. I have just as much to reflect upon as far as like the actions of my ancestors, as anyone else does, because for better or worse, whether you could really call it a choice or not, they made choices, that affected the outcome for, generations like mine and beyond. So, I think now, as tribal sovereignty is ignored, and threatened, I feel like it's very important that we, work together with other nations and try to regain some of that, the strength in numbers, because I mean, it's been a numbers game the whole time. The blood quantum to, eliminate more and more natives and dispossess more and more people from land. It's been a numbers game on the colonial side of just making us less and less. So I just feel like getting together is really important. So I'm proud of the Potawatomi Confederacy, although my nation has not officially, or maybe the Citizen Potawatomi Nation hasn't officially joined the Potawatomi Confederacy, but that is like too much protest from a lot of us who really find the importance of being together with our people. So a lot of political stuff going on.
So wait, you mean the Citizen Band is the one that came to Kansas and Oklahoma and stuff, and then there's people back in the Great Lakes who took a different path.
So there's 9 to 13 different bands, depending on who all you count, of Potawatomi. And I used to say we were the southernmost band, but that's not true. There was a group that went to Mexico from I can't remember if they left from Indiana or which area they left from. But anyway, they have maintained a community. They've maintained language that they're speaking in community, and I didn't know about that, until pretty recently. So, but yes, Kansas has the Prairie Band Potawatomi, which we are closely related with because we were all the same group before the Citizen Band split off in the 1880s. I'm really bad with dates. But Yeah, there are other bands up in the Great Lakes area. Every year there's a Potawatomi gathering, an annual gathering. So we get together, and this year we'll be going to Gun Lake. So anyway, traveling to different bands, and it's always really good when we get to go up north where our homelands are, because that's where the relatives, that I think that the word indigenous really means like connected to land, right? And connected to place. And so that's where our indigenous relatives are, like maple and wild rice, and sweetgrass, and all the things, berries, just all the things that made us who we are. Also, the lakes themselves, like the fish, um, the ability to transport yourself with a canoe, is like this really. Um, I gotta write a song about that. It's a really cool concept for me. When I first visited up in Perry Sound, Wasauksing is an island that has never been ceded. It's always been Potawatomi territory, and going to visit them was really cool because I got a glimpse of like how important the canoe life was, and the water and connection over the
Yeah.
waterways. So it was really cool.
Right, with a canoe, you could really haul a lot of stuff. You could move quickly. Dragging anything across the land as a one or two people, it can be much more difficult. But with a canoe, it's like shoot, shoot, you can just get around. It's pretty speedy. In your talk that that we have been discussing, you also mentioned Robin Wall Kimmerer, who wrote that amazing book Braiding Sweetgrass, and I read that last year. It was really a nice read. I enjoyed her perspective a lot. And yeah, you were talking a bit about the native ancestry of everyone, and I really resonate with that because I've been also looking into my family history and trying to trace back where we came from. And it's like everyone on Turtle Island, everyone here has been colonized in a way where we really have been disconnected to where we're from. When my ancestors came here from Ireland and Poland and other places, they quickly lost their language. I don't know how to speak Polish or Irish. No one in my family really does. Maybe my grandma knew some words, and her parents, and before that, but they were all taught to become Americans, and whatever that means, and U.S. persons, maybe we could call them, and that language was lost. So yeah, that whole concept, I mean, of being colonized, because I think it's really easy to just be like, you're a colonizer, you did everything wrong, and I'm thinking, well, maybe the first people colonized by the British Empire were English people. And they got colonized into the idea of being British, and then they spread that, and it kind of became this whole chain of, basically like a chain of abuse, where there's some hierarchy and it wants everyone to submit to it. And there's all these accounts of people coming from Europe, and they're coming to Turtle Island, and they're meeting people with a different way, and they're attracted to it, and they want to join that way. And in many ways, I think that the destruction against a lot of the native communities was because of that, and because the sovereign, the people who consider themselves to be sovereign over others, the people who call themselves kings and queens, they didn't like losing their peasants overseas to a different way of life that suited them better.
Yeah. And there's also, varying accounts on how, how differently even like people of different nationalities, when they were coming here, were interacting with native populations. And so, yeah, definitely. And I think there is so much culture and really cool history and religion, and all of those things that come from native European communities. And I'm curious, just because like I'm Potawatomi, but I have ancestors who are Cherokee, who are Appalachian, like of unknown origin, like had been there forever, Appalachian. And then also I have a lot of French ancestors. Not just through the Potawatomi side, because like a lot of Potawatomi are very, very much French DNA. But also because the French were better at fitting in. You know, when they came in, they were better at kind of integrating into the Potawatomi culture. And so also a lot of French on my mom's side, my mother's side. And so I would really love to go and do more research there. I've got lots of, that family is a really big family, and I've got lots of relatives on that side who love to do genealogy and things like that. And they've traced that side of the family back to like the 1300s, which is incredible. Wow. Because like I can do that with the Potawatomi side because the Jesuits kept good records, right? You know, because like the church was keeping track of everybody. But for that to be possible on the other side of my family is really cool. And I really want to go to France and like go to the country, you know, and go and see what indigenous France is like, you know. I don't know how much of that is left, but I think that would be really cool. And yeah, I think that it is going to take all kinds, like, to fix the messes that we're in, and we are in so many, but, like, especially environmentally and with, like, the way that we're behaving as a species on the planet. Like, it can't just be native peoples that fix this. And so it's going to have to be everyone who kind of gets that, you know, reclaims that mindset of belonging to the land, belonging to a place, of having a relationship with the earth, you know. And I think it sometimes becomes a little bit of like a fetishization of native culture, that like, oh, people, the native people are so like connected to the earth or whatever. And it's like, not really. It's not necessarily true. I think that some people are just like more drawn to it, you know, than others. But I think we all have to come to a place of of like deep respect for the land and for what's happening and for our place in the larger ecosystem for things to get better. So
right, yeah, the fetishization and appropriation, but then there's also inspiration. I mean, I think it would be sad for people to be like, well, I don't want to appropriate anything, so I'm not going to take any of these valuable insights, because that's, you know, they want to be hands off and kind of treat people like a museum artifact, like you can't touch, you can't interact. And it's like, well, people were always interacting. You know, you see there's like Potawatomi people wearing top hats, and you know, everyone was switching around and exchanging, and that's really the magic of culture, is that bi-directional flow. Once it becomes unidirectional, that's the hegemony. And it, for example, Britain, again, expecting to be able to go into all these countries and do whatever they want, and then getting mad when people are coming back and suddenly everyone's eating curry or something. You know, it's like, what do you expect when you're going, or France, when they go to all these different countries and take their resources, and then suddenly the French language is being changed by African people speaking French, and the Academy of the Language is all in a hissy fit because suddenly the purity of French is being questioned and altered by these people who were colonized into the language. It's like, if you give people, if you put, when you know, it's a back and forth, and people have to always respect and understand that.
Yeah, there are many things about native cultures, you know, that are very rightfully protected. You know, I will say that there are some things about, you know, our ceremonies and some of our foods even, you know, that are very rightfully like protected from the greater, you know, the general public, I would say. But that's only because of the threat that they've been under, and I think that a lot of the trauma of the loss of culture, and not just like the loss of culture, but like the loss of culture in one generation, going back to some point, like an ancestor, sometimes, for different people, like sometimes only 2 or 3 generations away, which is just like nothing, right? It's like that it's that can cause people to become really protective, and I honor their right, to be protective of certain things. And so I think, yeah, and then you run into problems with, like, yeah, I don't want to get into the other problems as far as like selling culture, because that's like obviously
Yeah.
obviously a terrible thing that sadly gets done. And not just, anyway, but I think the reclamation of culture, on one hand, it's like I want everyone to be able to participate in things that are connective and are healing and all of that. And then also, like, I have to recognize that there are, even my own family members that don't even know some of these things exist while they're being kind of peddled to settlers. You know what I mean? It's just, that's a little bit, it's a little bit tricky to like look at your family and see like how many of these ways, like how long will it take for us to get back the things that we lost, while like recognizing that everybody is, everyone has gone through that loss in one way or another. And I feel like being in the land that you're in, like if I was in a different country, I would want to honor and recognize the land, the deities associated with that land, the plants that are associated with that land. Not that my own ancestral, connections wouldn't matter anymore, but being on the land that I was on, like that's where my sustenance is coming from. So that's where I would want to acknowledge, and participate in. So I don't know, when you put that up, that's where I feel like, people who have come here in all different ways, I feel like they should be recognizing the land that's here and the deities that are associated with the plants and things like that are here. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think a lot of it has to do with the way information is transmitted, because when we're taught about things from the people who are practicing those things, it's different than hearing about it from some kind of distant source and then trying to make sense of it away from it. When you're in a land of a people and you're around the people and you're observing them doing things, and they invite you in and they say, hey, this is our practice, this is what we do now, and you start learning like that, that creates a lot more continuity of the practice, and it's much more acceptable to enter in when you're invited and when people are sharing, and it's a conversation. And then there's the other side where it's kind of like the look at these people, I'm studying them from behind the glass, and I'm going to read some texts about them, and I'm going to make some diagrams and think about them as this almost like a alien creature, and that kind of othering happens in those situations where it's like just sort of not there is not continuity. There's a space between, and I think that the continuity of the cultural transmission from people to people and having it go smoothly is really an important part of the healing process.
Yeah, and recognizing that, if something is shared with you, that's not necessarily like, there's a lot of concepts of like belonging that are interesting, because I think in our transactional, like, colonized understanding of sharing, if someone shares something with me, then I would be free to share it even after I've changed it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to share it with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
While I think that a lot of our, especially when it comes to ceremony or ceremonial items or understandings, like, it could be shared with me, but the origin is always the same, you know, and like
Mm-hmm.
it's not for me to take um and alter and then present to entirely different, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
um yeah.
There's a lot of subtlety and a lot of really, people need to have a lot of slowness and understanding and respect about those kinds of things for sure. I mean, it's really easy to be like, wow, that looks really cool, and I'm gonna make my new T-shirt like out of that, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, and it's like, well, actually, that was something that is only seen by these people at this time of year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, respect, just like a lot of respect for I've made those mistakes, you know, in my journey as far as like reconnecting um with Potawatomi culture. We, you know, when you grow up in Oklahoma, like, everyone thinks they're native. So, like, there's a very, like, pan-Indian feel to all of
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma. Like, you know, weed store logos have teepees on them in Oklahoma, and it's just like, it's an aesthetic, you know, the native
Mm-hmm.
aesthetic. And so growing up around that, um, and then, like, coming to understand that my status as actually like as a Potawatomi national, like, that's a very different thing than just being like, um, oh, we're Indian, yeah, sure. Like, I'm Native American, you know, like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different understanding, and um, I was going somewhere else with that, but I forgot. I lost my train.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's just, I totally understand though that, like, yeah, selling is kind of part of that selling culture too, and making it more of a brand rather than
Mhm.
a lifestyle or something deeper, like a holistic experience. Are there some ways that your native heritage have shaped your path as a creative person?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of my songwriting has come from, well, travel, first of all, and like being able to go to back to the Potawatomi homelands has inspired a lot of songwriting. Um, and then also just kind of like the path that the native foods movement has taken me on. I started participating in like indigenous food summit events back in 2019 or 2018, um, and was able to do a couple of those events. And those were really transformative, like being around people who were working with indigenous ingredients and creating these like incredible dishes. I've always been a little bit of a foodie, and so like the indigenous foods movement was a really great place for me to kind of fall in and start to learn more about culture. Because like at these, the thing about indigenous food summits is like, it's not just food, it's ceremony, it's culture, because indigenous practices are way more holistic. So like um if you're harvesting beaver, like, you're not just hunting and cooking. You know, there's all of these processes that go into how you harvest, what happens when you harvest, you know, what happens, um, you know, when you're cooking, when you're eating. There's just so many things, and food is such a pivotal point of culture, that all of these things kind of like can come in
Mm.
as teaching tools. And so like the land is our teacher, the land is our education, the buffalo is our education, you know, as it's been said. um so many things can can come out of just like the simple act of getting a bunch of native foodies together. It was super cool to have that experience. And I wish I could do more of that. I did a couple before the shutdown of everything, and then really haven't been back to much since. But so that stuff definitely has. And then I've founded Goodway Gardens, which is like my little way of bringing that kind of land-based connection into my own home community here in Emporia, Kansas. So it's like I try to bring the best things that I got out of those experiences and say, like, how can I kind of recreate something that fits for our community? And the concert series is like the low-hanging fruit there. Like, I know I can present concerts because like I've just made so many friends over the years in the industry, and so like that was a easy point of invitation, to get people together. And so that that happening, and then building the garden and inviting people to come and work together, those are all really influenced by my understandings of what it means to be Indigenous, to work in community, to live in community, to work with the land, and to respect, where your food comes from, and to develop, to build your life kind of around the important things, and to slow down, take a step back from the things that cause it to be necessary for us to eat fast food in the first place.
Right.
You have to start somewhere, I think. And so I just have tried to develop something that invites everyone to kind of reconnect and to slow down and to be in community.
And that's, I'm glad you brought up the native foods movement. And you also mentioned something about food sovereignty, which I thought was an interesting topic as well, because it does seem like, food, we need it, and everyone eats. And food, it is a thing that brings us together. The kitchen is the heart of the house. The kitchen is the place where everyone wants to hang out and be. and there's so many important things happening in a kitchen. When you're camping, you need to make a kitchen. You need to make a place to make food. Anywhere a person is living, or people, there has to be some kitchen somewhere. And like with the fast food and things like that, the kitchen has sort of been transformed into this other kind of thing, where it's like another, like an alternative reality kitchen. But with food sovereignty, we think about like how people have been controlled so much with food access, with the potato famine in Ireland, where it's British colonizers taking all of the food, and so the Irish people are starving because it wasn't really the famine didn't have enough for them to eat. It was just that there was an obligation to sell a certain amount of food over, and what was left wasn't enough. So rather than feed the people, they gave it all to across the channel, or even you hear stories about places like North Korea or other spots where the access and control of food is really an important what do you call it, a vector of inflicting control on people. Because if people don't have the ability to eat freely, then it's much easier to use food as a way to push them in a certain direction. I think when I was doing some gardening work in Chicago years ago at this community garden, some people were telling me about amaranth, and how the amaranth was this really important staple food in Central America, or Turtle Island, or I don't know what they would call it there, but in those lands. And when the Spanish came, they were destroying a lot of the amaranth, and just getting rid of it because the people were able to eat it in such abundance. So it was like this. It was like looking at what people eat and destroying it is a really important colonial tool. Like, let's make sure that freely available food is difficult. Look at the buffalo. The buffalo were everywhere, and then people on the plains were hunting that and living very easily. And so all those buffalo skinners came out and killed the buffalo and didn't even eat it. They just left piles of it because the main point was to make it difficult for people to eat freely. And they wanted people to fall in line with the program.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned amaranth, just because like that was one of the seeds that I took home from one of these food summits, and in 2020, I think, I decided to plant some of it. I was living in the country at the time. I live in town now. I live in the suburbs now, but I was living out of town at the time, and just decided to plant this amaranth. And amaranth is like the tiniest little seed. It's so small. And I just roughed up a little patch of ground and planted it there. And those tiny seeds grew into like 13-foot plants with, these seed heads that were just like laden with millions of seeds. And yeah, it's like, that's hope to me. That's like the hope of a seed is so incredible, because this is how the earth knows how to take care of us. Like, this is how it's always been. It's such a fundamental starting place of abundance, I think, when you get back to what the plants remember. I think that's important to know, is that the plants haven't forgotten. We have forgotten how abundance works. Like, we have bought into scarcity, and we've bought into exclusivity and things like that, but the plants have not forgotten. So I think that's a really important thing to recognize.
Yeah, this kind of manufactured scarcity of our current situation is really apparent in many ways. I love dumpster diving and things like that, and we throw away so much food. I work as a substitute teacher, and I see firsthand how much food gets thrown away in schools. The children, they don't know any better. They have so much abundance of food that they can just easily throw away a complete tray of food and not feel anything about that, which makes my heart just cry a bit. But they don't have an experience of not having food. But then there's the whole idea that we don't have enough things, so we have to compete very heavily for them. And the whole just the idea that we should keep supplies low so that the prices can be higher. We look at housing and things like that too, and the lack of availability of very important needs, and you look at the cost of housing and the availability of it, and why are all these homes being made that are luxury and more, $500,000 or more, and where's a $20,000 home? Where are those? It's engineered. We could build plenty of dwellings for that price. We could be feeding everyone very easily. We have so much abundance, but it's not profitable to have abundance. When there's an abundance, it's hard to control people too, right? Like, if there's an abundance of buffalo and the people can just eat a buffalo, why are they gonna listen to you tell them what to do? Because they can just go off and kill a buffalo and eat for days and days and days.
Yeah. I think the effort, like, it just makes me think about these, current efforts to, to further impoverish the people, the American people, and how they are disguised as efforts toward prosperity, like, and it makes me wonder about, people want to have an America that's prosperous, and there's this idea that like we were going into financial ruin, and now we won't be, or something, which is, it's all very ridiculous. But you know, these fundamental truths about who is benefiting from these, you know, these manufactured problems. And yeah, I have, forgive me if I just have the greatest of doubts as to like how any of that is going to get fixed by, yeah. Anyway, I'm being a little bit veiled because I don't really want to talk about it, but
Yeah.
it's kind of, I don't know. I just wish people would think a little harder about like who are we trying to make rich here? Like, and what does it really mean to be wealthy or to have enough? I think a lot about that, just because like when we were growing up, my parents were very young, and they both worked very hard, but we were still pretty poor. You know, like as far as like if hard work made you rich, my mother would be a millionaire, you know, but that's not how this world works. And so, but I still think that, you know, a lot of people really believe that. People really believe that poor people deserve to have nothing, you know, and if you're on any kind of assistance, then you better not, you know, do anything for yourself. You better not like indulge in, you know, a manicure or whatever the thing is that people are railing against right now. And it's like, I think we have to, yeah, I don't know what the answer is, because like I really feel like there's been so much psychological warfare against poor folks, and just like that people really kind of hate their own situations and don't don't recognize that, like, if, like I said, if hard work got you the things that they promise, like, we'd all be doing really well. And the accusations of like people being lazy and wanting handouts, meanwhile we're all like GoFundMeing each other, you know, we're all like Venmoing each other money for dinner, and like helping each other pay rent and car bills, you know. It's just like, that's not the reality. Like, the reality is not laziness. It's just like the fact that we're all kind of, we got to make a choice to help each other out rather than point fingers, I think, is the bottom line.
I really like how Vandana Shiva talks about it, because she made some really astute observations about how a certain part of feminism was about joining the patriarchy. And it was just this really backwards idea that the women will all just become like the men and join the patriarchal structure and benefit from that. And you get, you know, that's kind of like the suits with the big shoulder pads and this kind of Hillary Clinton vibe, where everyone's just going to become one of the boys and do the same thing.
Right.
And she was saying the opposite should happen, where the guys leave the patriarchy behind and join the domestic life, which is the real center. There's so much productive work that does not produce capital, that does not produce money, but it's important work. And when I'm working full time to earn money, I don't have energy to clean my house or cook full square meals every day. I don't have the energy to do anything for myself, because I've given it all in the service to laboring for exchange for some token that's a valueless token that we just assign an arbitrary significance. And yeah, it's really interesting how I really love, I mean, she's such a cool speaker, and I think a lot of her topics are so on point to what we've already been discussing. And I think that's a really nifty idea, that let's drop out of that system as much as we can and put the kitchen in the center, and the hearth, the home, the work of the home. All right, it's labor, but it's, why are we I don't want to see everyone starting to capitalize on their labor at home. Like, I really don't want a monetary value for me taking out the trash or cooking a meal. I don't want to see that. I would rather let's get rid of all of that and look at the value of our gifts that we're giving. Like if I'm cooking for people and feeding them, that idea of exchanging gifts rather than capital. What was it? There's this book I read too. It's Debt, the First 5,000 Years by David Graeber. And he talks a lot about this, like what were societies like before we had money? Were they bartering? Well, apparently not. He says anthropologically, bartering is more of a result of what happened after we had a medium of exchange. And you wouldn't have the money, so you would barter around the value of things and money. But before that, people were, if you kill a buffalo, you've got to feed a lot of people because you can't just eat it all yourself. So someone kills a buffalo and the whole village gets to eat, and they have honor in feeding people. And then another person wants to have that honor to feed the people next. It's like, it's a joy to be the giver, the big person who is bringing the offering to the table. And if everyone's sort of striving to be the one to provide next because you get to feel good about it, that's a great reward.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking about the difference between, these, I don't know if you call them like stopgap measures or whatever, like the idea that as long as we have capitalism, we're going to need socialism, like as long as we have these systems that, like, I might not be a hardcore socialist, but as long as we have capitalism, you've got to have, you have to have it, because people will fall through the cracks. And the difference between, like, so the president of Mexico, and I can't remember her name right now, but how she like issued this stipend to women for all of their unpaid labor. And it's like that, what you were saying, like, we don't really want to monetize domestic labor, but as long as people are being exploited, like, you have to do something to fix it. And then, yeah, like the community aspect of living, and how threatening that is to the colonial powers, to the empirical powers, and like how we can't just have, like, where's the autonomous zone for the people who don't want to buy a $500,000 house? Like, where's the place for the people who, and as far as the elite are concerned, we could just, starve. Like, they're not concerned with people who aren't, like, striving to be better than everyone else, and I feel like that's at the core of the American dream, right? Is like, you just want to be better than other people, and that the competition, I really think, should be saved for sport. Competition should be saved for fun, not for, like, basic human needs. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. I have this kind of cartoon in my head where it's sort of like when, imagine everyone had $1 million. Well, how could I make someone clean my toilet? If you already have $1 million, why would you clean my toilet? Like, maybe you would see how dirty my house is one day, and as a gift would be like, yeah, I'm so tired of seeing your house like this. I really want to help you. But there's no way I could force you to do it. There's no way I could compel you easily. But if I had $1 million and you're in a desperate situation where you can't even eat without some money, and I say, if you clean my toilet, I'll give you, $5, and maybe that would be more agreeable. So there's something about the existence of poverty as being a necessity for those who need to have a lot of people do things for them that don't have enough honor to get it done without money. Because for sure, if we have a sort of honor or some other kind of abundance of personal power, I suppose, I don't know what to call it. Like, if we can get people to do things as volunteers a lot of times when they see that there's a need for it and they want to do it. Like, I was working at a school yesterday, and some of the kids in the class wanted to put away the books. Well, they weren't getting paid to do that. I didn't tell them to do it. They just wanted to help. So I
Mhm.
let them because I was working as a librarian that day as a sub. So there's some component of feeling good for taking care of others. That's a wonderful way to get things done. But money gets things done in a different way where it's like, hey, I know you don't want to do this, but if I give you this, maybe you will. And if everyone has their needs met, that money still has a value, I suppose, but it won't be as easy to compel people if they don't need to do what you say in order to eat.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, you can't. I think it's interesting that when the settlers, a lot of the early accounts uh, from settlers that were documenting the North American indigenous tribes were calling people, they were saying they were lazy
Hmm.
and like, um, but everyone was fed,
Yeah.
everyone was housed, everyone was clothed. Like, not to say that it was some sort of like utopia and there were never issues. Like, certainly there were, um, but it wasn't around. It like nobody was homeless,
Yeah.
and I think that's the level, like just like the hierarchy of human needs or whatever level, of understanding that the indigenous cultures had, that it was just a given. Um, and interestingly, like, it was a given that the home belonged to the woman, like, and how different, a little bit of a jump, but like how different our society is because of the fact that like it's home ownership for a woman is like a hard thing. It's a difficult thing. I'm 45 and I do not own a home. Like, I live with my partner who owns a home, but I don't own a home. And I don't know. It's very anecdotal and like things could be different, but like I think that it's part of it is like just this understanding that um or this misconception that like the years that I spent not working because I was nursing a child, didn't have any value in the society that I live in. Or the
Right.
years that I spent, that some people spend caring for their elders, that need full-time care. And that work is somehow valueless is just it's such a it's a fantasy, that's not real.
Yeah, you should have been slinging burgers and selling and frying
Right.
fries.
Yeah.
That's more valuable to feed people fast food than it is to take care of the elderly and the babies.
Yeah. Just like institutionalizing every stage of life has been such a tool, of separation.
Oh yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think the concept of the woman owning the home and that a marriage proposal was like, here's your house. Do you want to live in it with me? But then if you messed up, like, she could have your stuff outside the house and that would mean that you don't live there anymore. And how much, yeah,
The Wandering Man. That's
how better men would behave. How much better men would behave if this was
Oh
true.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it seems like that. I've heard this story also from some African villages where the women own the house, and the men will kind of wander around until someone finds them interesting or agreeable enough, and he'll stay. And then after she gets tired of him, he's off on the road again. And then
Hmm.
being on the road for a while, he starts to miss that home life. And all right, I'm going to act differently this time.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a release valve maybe. I like that. I think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because like, what are we doing? Basically, sending children to daycare and then if the both of the parents of that child have to work, and then half of that income is basically paying for the child care. So what like pay for someone to watch your child so you can go to work to pay them to watch your child. And that just seems like a terrible model. I mean, it's nice to have other people watch children, for sure. I know that parents need other support, right? Like having to deal with your child all the time, especially as a 4 or 5 year old who is constantly requiring attention. It's
Mhm.
really great to have other children and adults. But that's kind of the point. I think you mentioned in your performance a couple the other month that I saw at Capcom Studios, you said something about the back 40 acres. And that really stuck with me because it's this, why do kids not behave in school? A lot of it's because they need to run around. Like you said
Mhm.
about the guys, the in the when you're talking about the buffalo processing, and there's these running kids that just they run
Mhm.
back and forth, and they're bringing things here and there or communicating. Before text messaging, the child would have a note or just memorize something to say from
Mhm.
one parent to the next, and they're gonna go run for 20 minutes to somewhere else. That's what they're meant to do. They're not meant to sit
Mhm.
in a chair for 8 hours a day just doing whatever boring things in front of them.
Yeah, I'm um I did really well in school. I was expected to get good grades and I did. But there was a lot of things that were hard, like math and things like that. And then I went to college and just like could not. I couldn't. I did not couldn't figure it out at all. I couldn't stay on track. Something about the rhythm of like when things had to be submitted and just the difference of like in high school it was like do the work, you learn the thing, do the work, turn it in, done. Um and somehow like I was able to like function with that. And then in college it was like no, absolutely not. And then a couple years down the road, I became a para at a high school. So I was like helping kids with IEPs to get through their high school classes. And just the difference of a couple of years, and I say a couple, I mean, I'm talking like 6 or 7 years. I was, like 26, 27 years old, I think, when I was helping as a para. Um, and just the difference in like how my brain was processing the information that was coming from a textbook, and then I'm trying to translate it to this kid and like very clearly they're just like
Mhm.
it's just not computing at all, and I'm like, man, this this will be so easy for you in 5 years. When your frontal lobe is all the way developed, this is going to be so much easier. And like, I have a kid right now who's in middle school and struggles with different things. And I just, I can't get myself too worked up about it, about her, performance or whatever at school, because it's like, I want you to be good to people. I want you to be good to your teachers. And I want you to cause problems, but also like, do your best, and that's all you can do. Because the, yeah, the school system is really set up for like a certain kind of mind,
Mhm.
and as much as I was able to succeed in high school, like that did not translate to my early adulthood at all. So I'm just not very worried about whether or
Yeah.
not you get graded, get straight A's or anything like that.
I mean, at that age, some intellectual development is important, and I know that's something that people need to do for themselves. Learning how to read, learning how to do basic math is fundamental to being able to operate in the kitchen, in the home, in the
Mhm.
world. We have to have skills like that. But how it's presented to us is so backwards and uninteresting most of the time. And I think about once children are about the age of 12 years old, 11 years old to 17 or 18 years old, they have so much social development that's happening
Mhm.
about how to deal with one another, how to deal with being bullied, how to deal with their sexuality coming online, and how to be
Mhm.
safe with that, and how to have autonomy over themselves. And that's what they're striving for. That they don't want to be bossed around when a teenage kid just suddenly doesn't want to have anything to do with their parents. they're stepping back because yeah, they need to start to develop themselves from their own experiences and observations, and they don't want their parents meddling with that. And it makes sense. But the way we have everything set up is kind of, in a way, it's a sort of delayed development because I think if you took a 13-year-old from 1,000 years ago and put them next to a 13-year-old now, the one from 1,000 years ago would have so much more maturity and understanding because they would probably already be working in some craft or field to almost expert level. And
Hmm.
they might even be ready to have a family at that age because they were so their maturation phase wasn't delayed, and we're delaying our maturation. I feel like even when I turned 30, I still felt like I was a teenager.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that um, there are so many ways in which like a subsistence lifestyle is so much more forgiving for all of these differences of development and differences of um, gifts, you know, and talents and things like that. And yeah, it's a shame that so many kids eventually end up, you know, funneled into incarceration, basically because of their inability to function in this system that's like really set up for a very specific type of brain.
Yeah. Yeah, it's brutal. I've witnessed a lot of really capable people getting squashed down by those systemic flaws or designs. We could, I mean,
Hmm.
who knows what? The school to prison pipeline, the school to employee pipeline. We adults in our day and age could not really be employees without their children being in school. So there's a lot there where the school is training people to sit at a desk and do what they're told without being too questioning. I mean, critical thinking is encouraged, but not to the level of being critical about why are we doing these stupid standardized tests? I don't want to. And everyone's kind of being colonized actively into these roles. And then you become a worker, and then your children can go to the school so you have for the free time to work. But it didn't always used to be that way. Adults used to do interesting things around the home or in their community, and the children would wander around together and watch those adults and take an interest. If someone's making a canoe, maybe one child really wants to learn that, or someone's making beadwork and some other child really falls into that. And maybe we can, you could trust. I mean, you really, I feel like people need to learn to trust their desire to learn things as it comes because we have a desire to learn something because it's in front of us. It's a situation that we're dealing with now. If there's a certain math problem that I need to know to repair my fence or whatever it is, like you have to do some geometry about some building in your home that you're doing, then that's a good opportunity to learn it. But if there's nothing going on in your life about that, then teaching someone to do that in the classroom has no relevance to them, and they're not going to learn it because they're a rational being who wants to learn the things that are in front of them that they're dealing with.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think the remembrance that there's plenty of work to do. Like there's lots of work to be done, always. And like that the mythical job creator, you know, is like become a deity in the society, and they're just really completely unnecessary.
Yeah, there's plenty of work to do. Like, I'm going to come
Yeah.
up with some more work that's very
Yeah.
useful, but will pay you a lot.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, Changing the gears a little bit, how has it been working with Potawatomi language? I see you're getting into a lot of the words and the history of the words and bringing it into songs. I saw your video, the animation that you did uh, with another artist, and it was really beautiful animation and also bringing in some language.
Yeah, that was the first time to kind of bring in any language. I've got lots of community around language that lots of people who are really dedicated to teaching, learning, and sharing And I'm not that great of a learner. Like, language is really hard for me. I don't know. I feel like I'm the best way for me to memorize the words is like to make them into songs now is where I'm at. So like I very recently, just like last week, wrote a song that's all in Potawatomi about a woodpecker. And like one of my teachers sends out an email, or he's got a Patreon, and so the Patreon email was like 5 sentences about a woodpecker, and I was like, okay, I could turn this into a song. So I did, and now I like will never forget bapase, which is like the word for woodpecker.
Nice.
And then it's starting to help me, like, so it's all about hearing. I heard him. Did he hear me? Or I heard the woodpecker. Did the woodpecker hear me? Type thing. So like I'm starting to. It's helping me with just like remembering how the sounds of things, and kind of tricking my brain into learning some language. I've known my traditional greeting for a long time, and I've kind of like changed it up and added some things to it and taken some things away, but I have a really hard time with retention. So that's my next tool, like write songs about things that that I want to remember, and hopefully that'll help others too that have like the same kind of brain that I have.
Yeah, someone told me that the memory that we have for songs is a completely different memory than we have for events and experiences.
Really?
I had one of my cousins had a traumatic brain injury about a year and a half ago, and he was telling me recently about it, and he said that he couldn't remember anything, but songs he could remember, and he mentioned that it's in a different place of our brain where we hold those things.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because my friends give me a hard/good time about like I'm a lyrical encyclopedia. Like I can remember a ton of lyrics. I very rarely like just like blank out. I will sometimes, just like blank out on like the words to a song. But I typically have a really, really good memory for that. Now, if you ask me like what happened yesterday, I would have a really hard time telling you. But, yeah. Or like, just a lot of things about just memory, remembering to do things. I technology keeps me on track. Like I wouldn't have a career if it wasn't for Google Calendar, that kind of thing. But for some reason, I can really memorize lyrics very well. So yeah, I buy that.
I totally feel that about Google Calendar. I mean, I need to. It's like if I put my water bottle out somewhere, I need to write a memo, yeah. Like get your water bottle before 3 p.m. Because I've definitely lost lots of things that I just put somewhere and absentmindedly forget about.
Yeah, for sure.
So you're involved in a lot of projects. I mean, you mentioned some of them. The what was it? The Goodway Gardens and Weeda Skirts, and you have your own music project. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about any of your projects?
Yeah, Goodway is in its 3rd season. Goodway Gardens, we call them Goodway Sundays, first Sunday of the month, and we've got a really great season planned. And we also have big plans for the future of the garden. We have had I would say like 25 by 25 spot that we've been gardening. This will be the 3rd year. Next year, we just put billboard tarps down last month so that we can have like a 50 by 50 spot next year. So we're increasing the size of the garden space, and really with an eye toward more food production. The property also has 15 acres of tallgrass prairie, so we always have to be mindful of like what we're bringing in, making sure that it fits in well with the environment. And that all that land is donated to us in kind. So it's kind of funny. We're a land-based organization without any land. So the History Center has a house that's a Welsh farmstead that was willed to them by the family that built it. And so it has a lot of outdoor space that has been previously unutilized. So that's a partnership that we're acting in right now to have that garden and the concert series there. So that takes up a lot of time. Also, I am currently the president of Folk Alliance Region Midwest. So we're the region that goes from Kansas all the way up to Saskatchewan and Nunavut. And so we have an annual conference. We do a lot of virtual events. So lots of activity going on there that keeps me pretty busy too. Yeah, and then the Skirts and I have a lot of shows upcoming. We'll be at the Ship the end of this month. So nice. I'm really stoked about being up there. And we've got Topeka coming up next week. We'll be at the Owl Creek Jamboree this year down in Humboldt, Kansas in April. Going up to Michigan for Pump Stock Festival in June. And then July and August starts to get into time when I'm really up around Chicago and Michigan a lot for gathering and different performances. And as always, we will be, as always, I say that, like, I don't want to take that for granted, but as we have been for the past 3 years, we'll be at the Walnut Valley Festival and the main stages again. So very stoked to be back.
Awesome. Yeah, I look forward to WINFIELD this year as well. Well, WINFIELD is Walnut Valley Festival, but everyone calls it WINFIELD.
WINFIELD / Bluegrass. I saw somebody ask the other day, why do people from WINFIELD call it Bluegrass? And it's like, well.
Yeah. Yeah, Bluegrass is coming. Yeah, that's cool. I saw that also. It was really interesting to see that you have a pretty close friendship with Peter OVIATT.
Oh yeah.
And it's really funny because he and I were in a band together when he was in high school and I was going to Kansas State, and I was in Manhattan and I met these theater kids, and he was one of them. And so we created this band. It was called Blum, and it was him, Emily Atchison, and Jeremy Gibson, and we made this, like, I was doing all this electronic stuff, and Peter would play guitar, and Emily would sing, and Jeremy was doing some kind of turntablism, and we didn't really write any songs. We just kind of improvised a lot, and it was like a band of really inept performers, and it was kind of amazing to see how well he's come along on the banjo and as a studio person, as an engineer. How did you guys meet?
Through WINFIELD.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. So yeah, we met at WINFIELD. We met there and then began camping together with Mike Helvey and kind of the beginnings of the Halion group stuff. And so, yeah, all of the Halion stuff was recorded in Taos at his house. And then Music is Medicine was recorded there. And then the next album that I have coming out this year is called Stay Put, and it was also recorded there. And I'm actually driving to Taos on Sunday to go be with him and Whitney for a couple of days and then spend a good probably 8 hours in the studio getting the mix finalized. And that is set for release in August. So,
Sweet.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't realize that he would. But you were also working with Stanley Hotel. Is that right? Is that another?
So yeah, that was a different project. Stanley Hotel. I just got out of their studio last weekend. I'm very polyamorous when it comes to my bands and my friends and my collaborations.
Yeah. Polybanders.
But yeah, I just left their studio last weekend. Got to go down and do backup vocals on a project that I'm so excited about. With a Muskogee Creek artist. The project's called Dead Feather, and such a cool artist. Like he's a painter and a poet, and now he's done some film in the past too. But like now this rock and roll album, like 4-part series, is happening for him. And myself, my 2 daughters, and my adopted kid, who's a cousin, We all got to go and do some blood harmonies, do some Potawatomi blood harmonies on a Muskogee Creek rock and roll album, and I just like, oh man, it's gonna be so good. So that's called Dead Feather, and it'll be coming out. But they're in Oklahoma. I really love working with them too. Like it's a totally different beast. Like when we record in Taos, it's typically mostly live. Like we get all the bass tracks down in a live performance, and then he'll go back on top. And we've done a little bit more of this on this album, but going back on top with solos and embellishments, to fill out the sound. And with this album, we actually ended up recording one track here at my house just because I wasn't really happy with what we started out to do. I kind of got on an experiment that went not totally right. So we had to start over. But yeah, it's just totally different processes because, like, with the Stanley Hotel guys, I'll go down and record a song with guitar and vocals on a click track and walk away, and then a couple months later it's like this fully fledged like rock and roll song, and it's just a completely different process. They both, like, I think, have their places for different types of like my compositions. Like I have a couple of songs that I really want Stanley Hotel to work on because, like, I feel like these like building drums and organs and guitars and all these things on it, where some of my more of like folkier compositions really just need that true organic sound, which is what we have been really successful, I think, at capturing when we're in the casita in Taos with Peter. So yeah, and plus you get Peter's banjo on it, which I think he's my favorite banjo player in the world, and like don't tell any other banjo players I said that, but
Yeah, he is. I'm proud to have seen him so early on and seen the development. It's super cool. Let's see. Oh yeah, so you named a couple other artists from the Native community that you're working with, and I was wondering if you had any other artists that you really resonate with that you'd like to give a shout out to or share with our listeners, to people, some recommendations.
oh
I know it's
man,
hard to
I'm
narrow it
always,
down.
yeah, I'm always like, oh wait, what am I listening to? Um, I just got back from Folk Alliance International, where I got to see Kaya Cater perform. And I don't believe she's Indigenous. She's from Montreal, or from Canada, but I've been listening to that a lot. I've been listening to an album by Johnny Delaware that like popped up on my Spotify out of nowhere, called Para Yuvar, which I've been really into. I don't know. I just as far as like Indigenous artists, there's so much good stuff out there. And so much stuff that keeps coming and coming and coming out. And I think the Indigenous Music Summit folks, like up in Canada, have been doing such great things up there. And I really want to see more of that in the lower 48 down here. But that's like one of my other like imaginary, like somebody needs to do that, and I wish it was me, but I just don't have time.
Yeah, if you could clone yourself, then you'd be able to.
Yeah. But I, like, as far as inspiration, I always come back to listening to Samantha Crane because, like, she's from Oklahoma. She's Chata. She does Chata language songs, but also English, and mostly English. But she's got some new stuff coming out right now. I think the album's called Gumshoe. Certainly the single that was just released is called Gumshoe, and it's really great. So I would definitely shout her out.
Cool. Do you have any words of wisdom or advice for younger folks, especially for younger folks with Native heritage who are aspiring to share their creative voices?
I think it's important just to be genuine and like, I think there's a lot of pressure for I don't know, when I know that I've been like hired as a native performer, like I feel some pressure to like dress a certain way or whatever. And I don't know. I also I'm a big advocate for like present day native reality, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and so just be yourself. And like we all have very different stories. We all have very different ways that we come to creative work. And so to just be authentic and I think your differences, you know, what makes you different from the rest of um, from the rest of the native community, like what makes you different from like the stereotype typed ideas of what a native artist should be doing, like that's where your magic is, like that's your superpower, is all the ways that you don't fit in, which is what I'm coming more and more to learn. Like I'm 45 and still trying to hone into my authentic voice. You know, I think that's going to be
Mm.
a lifelong process. But yeah, the more that you can come out with, you know, a singular voice toward what's important to you and what's really important to um, what you've been driven to sing about, what you've been driven to paint, write, talk about, like that's what makes the magic. So
It's so funny. Yeah, I remember trying to copy the style of other artists in different forms of music or drawing or whatever it was, and never being able to be exactly like them and really getting down on that. But really, that difference is the you-ness that you need to lean into
yeah,
to
well, coming full
be
circle,
unique.
like we don't know who we are until we know who we're not, you know. So mimicry is like really important part of discovering who we're not, you know.
Yeah,
Like you go through the process of mimicry and then deciding, wait, you get to a certain point, and you're like, wait, this isn't me. I can't. I don't want to be this person. Who I am is different. And so yeah, keep finding those differences and pushing into those. Yeah.
great. Those are great words of wisdom that I think everyone can benefit from. Well, I think it's time to end the interview because I know you're a busy person and we've got a lot going on in our lives as people and creators and human beings. So I really want to thank you for joining me on this conversation
Thank
and
you.
sharing your experiences and insights and things like that. I look forward to seeing you in Walnut Valley, and let's see. I'm probably be able to make that show at the ship too.
Awesome.
That would be a fun one. So I look forward to it. Great. Well, Alexa, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. Hope you have a good day.
You too. All right. Talk to you later.
Okay, bye.